As many of you might have guessed, I am here to deconstruct reality, every aspect of it. Every thought, belief, concept, idea, value, judgment, meaning, purpose, experience, perception, identification, association, discrimination, observation, and motivation. All knowledge, facts, laws, truths, theories, and evidence. Whether it be science, philosophy, religion, spirituality, or education, none of it is above deconstruction. And this includes myself, my philosophy, everything I've ever said, my entire being. You draw something on a piece of paper, point to it, and call it something. Well, I am here to show you it can be erased. And even if I don't erase it, eventually it will erase itself. Now, there's no inherent problem with you drawing something and labeling it. The only issue that arises is when you form an attachment to your distinction. The drawing itself is just a harmless illusion, nothing more than a passing show. Go ahead and witness it, interact with it. Interpret it any way you want. The illusion in and of itself cannot harm you. The only harm that will emerge is when you start investing in an illusion. When one begins to get caught up in the passing show to where they forget that it's just a passing show. This is what can be referred to as being in delusion of an illusion. And where the harm comes in is, what do you think is ultimately going to happen if you form an attachment to an illusion? Eventually you are going to have to suffer its loss, sooner or later. If you grasp on to something in a tight grip, and then it gets ripped from you, that hurts. Indulging in an illusion is a tricky business. And this is what is meant by the Eastern philosophical wisdom of desire is suffering. Experiences and sensations alone cannot hurt you. It's your craving to attach to these experiences and sensations that hurts you. The degree of investment determines the degree of taxation. What separates an alcoholic from a person who has just an occasional drink? What's the difference between a cokehead and a person who does a line of coke at a party and then never seeks to use it again? What's the contrast between an unconditional relationship and codependency? Now, detachment doesn't mean avoidance or abstinence. And it doesn't mean one is cold or uncaring. Detachment, simply clarified, means to navigate through experience without grasping at it. Things arise and things fade away. Experience them, but don't try to hold on to them or to manipulate them in some attempt to prolong, sustain, or repeat them. Meet what comes and goes, and then let it go. And this means not only to actions and objects, but to thoughts as well. All phenomenal aspects of a reality are empty, unsubstantial, illusory distinctions. So go ahead and have fun with it. Traverse the stage and play your character. But do yourself a favor and keep pain and suffering to a bare minimum by never losing sight of the fact that it's all just a big work of fiction. Now, some people wonder, how can reality be an illusion? What makes reality an illusion? To answer this, one needs to address the questions of how can something be said to exist and what makes it real? Well, first off, people who are deluded and want to delude others are people who think it's important to make distinctions, and that through extended analyzation, overcomplication, and mondo-intellectualization, that some kind of truth can be found. But all that's really going on is yet even further dissection of already contrived distinctions to enable further separations through uber multiplication of partitions, categories, and classifications. But what is at the root of this motivation? The denial of delusion, which becomes obscured through self-reassuring comfort in the notion that reality and the awareness are somehow divided, that concept and object are not mutually exclusive, but in fact stand alone, independently from one another. This couldn't be further from the temporary aspects of functionality. It's this kind of separatist agenda that sets the stage for a dichotomy, which, when you boil it down, kind of becomes solipsism versus objectivism, which is ridiculous. As ridiculous and equatable to a parallel of science versus religion. Do you think science and religion should even be in the same ring together? Is it even a contest? Science is evidence-based, while religion is faith-based. So it's not even close to a fair fight. It's Bambi versus Godzilla. And the same is true for solipsism versus objectivism. Solipsism is evidence-based, while objectivism is faith-based. Which is why objectivism really doesn't belong in the realm of philosophy, but more in the realm of religion. Your awareness of your conscious perceptual experience is the only thing that you know to be for sure. This can be verified on the evidence of your awareness of your experience, can it not? So from where does this idea of some kind of separation existing between awareness and the so-called external come from? It's completely faith-based, mere speculation, lacking any evidence, based on already contrived distinctions, which further enables delusions through belief in the appearances of an illusion. The key point here is that there are no separations. And this ties into some other matters that should be clarified concerning some connotations of solipsism. First off, what's called solipsism is really just an awareness of now. What is clear, present, and self-evident. So therefore, this frame of reference doesn't really require a label. The fact that it has been labeled is indicative of yet another delusionary device aimed at maligning the awareness of now into an inventory item of fragmentation. This is an attempt to instill and harbor a distrust in the evidence of what one knows to be for sure, in favor of faith or belief in some so-called external factor that is in fact the source of reality. This is no different than a belief in a God. Only in this case, the God is some ambiguous aspect of separated external materials. Once the awareness of now has been misconstrued as such, then it becomes possible to obfuscate the simplicity of it and begin to import a bunch of assigned meanings to transmute the awareness of now into something other than what it is. So then the awareness of now is no longer the awareness of now, but hence becomes mere solipsism, an item on the supermarket shelf. In other words, awareness, the clear source of reality, may in fact not be the clear source of reality. So then it becomes unclear. The evidence of what is self-evident gets put into question. Once this is accomplished, then matters can be further convoluted by mischaracterizing solipsism with suspect associations. The main one being that solipsism is fundamentally egocentric. It would have to be, right? To believe that the self is the only thing that exists and that the world revolves around this self is egocentrism to the extreme, right? Well, that's not what solipsism is. No beliefs are required to recognize the awareness of now. The awareness of now is, and it is regardless of any thoughts, beliefs, meanings, purposes, or philosophical narratives assigned to it by the mind of an observer. Such conceptual distinctions may project and produce a reflection for interaction, but none of the content changes the fact that there is an awareness of content. And it's completely incongruent to recognize the oneness and unification of the awareness of now, and at the same time to believe that there is some kind of foundation present that defines and establishes an idea of a self of the world to be revolving around. Oneness with no separation means there is no self and there are no others. There is no internal and there is no external. These are only imaginary distinctions of content. The dream is always a great parallel because there really is no difference other than superficial differences of solidity, texture, and continuity. In your dream, what exactly is separate? What kind of divisions exist between the dream world, the dream characters, and the dream persona you are assuming? Now, of course, when you are deluded or caught up in the dream, you believe such divisions exist, and nothing could convince you otherwise. Yet naturally, when you wake up, you understand intellectually that it was nothing more than an awareness playing around in dream content, the essence of imagination. Or, in some cases, you realize it firsthand when you go lucid and see that you are dreaming while you are dreaming. What could also be known as dream enlightenment. So getting back to what's real, and how can something be said to exist? Let's pose these questions to the dream parallel. What is real in your dreams? You may say nothing because it's just a dream, but it most certainly seems real when you are confronted by something in a dream, no? What exists in your dream? Does your dream world have some kind of existence after you wake up? So it would seem that dream phenomena only exists as it's being experienced, that the dreamer and the dreamed are fundamentally intertwined and cannot exist independently of one another. So what makes you think that the waking reality is any different? The fact that the waking reality has denser textures and is more solidified. Whether dream reality or waking reality, your awareness of an experience is no different. So wouldn't density and solidity be more of an indication of attachment than any implication of any realness or unrealness to a perceived world of beings and objects? If density and solidity are hallmarks of realness, does this extend to within a reality contextualization, or only to reality contextualizations as contrasted to one another? In a dream, if you perceive one object as more solid than another, is that more solid object of greater substance? In the waking reality, is this also true? Is a rock more substantial than water? Is concrete more real than energy? You may say that it only applies to reality matrices as contrasted to one another. But isn't this wholly contingent on a frame of reference? In a dream, you may be dealing with numerous distinctions of quality and substance. But for as long as you are deluded, you have no idea that it's all equally the essence of imagination. Only by waking up are you then able to assign a distinction and erect a partition. A partition that, upon death, crumbles away. And as your life flashes before your eyes, it can be seen that your whole existence was simply a blink of an eye and a temporary moment of imagination. Will you then erect a new post-death partition? This is why waking up or dying doesn't unravel the delusion of illusion, nor does it resolve the desire for attachment, but yet might, in fact, perhaps only compound the issue. Yet, if we go lucid in a dream, or enlightened in the waking state, the delusions unravel. For our desire for attachment is revealed only to be the grasping at an illusion. The grasping that, once achieved, enables an appearance of density and solidity, which thereby conditions an impression of continuity. But beyond the attachment to a progressive personal narrative, wherein is the continuity? Naturally, if you attach yourself to a position, you will find consistencies in that position. Consistencies that comprise the distinctions of self-others, internal, external, and realness or unrealness. But if one were to detach from position, the consistencies and continuities are revealed for what they really are. Identifications and associations that are not self, but devices that an idea of a self are constructed from. So the consistency and continuity of your personal narrative stems from the familiarity fostered from attachments to a position. Yet it is not an unbroken sequence. For just as dreams are interrupted by intervals of being awake, the waking state is interrupted by intervals of dreams. Not to mention, of course, the borders of birth and death that outline the context of a self. So despite an attachment to position, there is no permanent continuity. Which brings us to an important point about all realities. There are no aspects of any reality that are permanent, fixed, and unchanging or non-transient. This is very obvious in dreams, and perhaps less obvious in the waking reality, but it's no different. From nothing, something manifests, develops, matures, peaks, declines, decays, and dissipates back into nothing. Illusion or not, when on this timeline is something considered real and existing? But more importantly, in order for something to be defined as real and existing, isn't an agency that defines real or existing a necessary prerequisite? And this is where we get to the meat of the matter. That people want to define real and existing as aspects that have substance independent of the ones who define it. This brings us back to the dichotomy of objectivism versus solipsism. We already know that a perceived reality exists in conjunction with awareness. This is self-evident and requires no evidence. But to assert that some kind of reality exists independent of awareness is an affirmation that does require evidence. If you want people to dismiss what is known to be for sure in favor of areas of speculation, it has to be based on a little more than just faith. So the burden of proof lies with objectivism. So please prove it and provide the evidence. Of course, this is impossible to prove, for if you remove awareness from existence, what exactly would confirm that a reality is still existing? And who would it confirm it to? So good luck with that one. But you have to wonder, what's the root motivation for people wanting to believe that some kind of reality exists independent of awareness? Well, it's not all that complicated. In fact, it's quite simple. Nobody wants to take responsibility for reality. Anything but that. It's what science and religion both share in common. Whatever is responsible for all of this is somewhere out there, right? Out there, in the literal abstract. People like to twist that around and equate metaphysics to being abstract aspects of the mind with no basis in reality. Even the word abstract is a delusionary device aimed at instilling a default assumption that what's real is found on the external, which of course leads one to dismiss their own awareness as an inconsequential product of the external. Yet if solipsism leads to introspection, as it should, then it becomes abundantly clear that the so-called external reality is just a reflection of the mind, which ironically means that what's most pure, real, and concrete is found within the internal. The further you search on the external, the more you are delving into the abstract, far removed from the source of reality. What a better way to avoid responsibility than to attribute it to something abstract? Whether God, nature, or a universe of forces and materials, we are not responsible. Something else separate from us has got to be responsible. And we are merely a byproduct of it, right? We are just the hapless victims of something much greater than us. It's awfully convenient, isn't it? A convenient way to avoid exercising responsibility.